주셔서 감사합니다. 먼저 PEFC 기관에 대해 소개 부탁드립니다.
It's a great honor to have you here, Mr. Eduardo. Can you please introduce
PEFC is a global network established 23 years ago. It started in Europe and expanded later to other regions, and today it's very strong in Asia and in North America, and moving forward in Africa and Latin America. Its aim is to ensure the consumer that forest products, mainly wood, but could be also bamboo and other rubber and other forest products, come from sustainable sources, from sustainable managed forests. This is done through the work at the forest level to norms that have been agreed internationally and nationally on sustainable forest management, and reviewing the full chain of custody until that forest product, be paper, furniture, or whatever, reaches the market. And later, this organization adapts the standards to the national conditions they approve, and then the system can run. And globally, we are set up out of this, in this moment, 55 from 130 forest nations that exist globally. These 55 national bodies are the main governing element of PEFC. They vote the board and they supervise through the General Assembly the work of PEFC together, that come through our channels are sustainable to the market, to the consumers, but as well is the most important non-state private forest organization that englobes all the forest stakeholders at national and global level, and also is working in the development area, especially with countries that still lack of requisites for sustainable forest management.
forest certification in detail more?
Forest certification replicates other systems that have been existing globally, that are basically under the frame of ISO, and that ensure that in an open, transparent process, the norms are set, normally adjusted on previous international processes and the legal requisites of a given country. And these norms are agreed in participatory processes and published. And from that norm on, accredited auditors review, being in this case in the forest, it would be in another kind of activity, and later in the industries and in all the trade until it reaches the consumer, that the wood is, or the forest product is sustainable at the forest level, but also in the chain of the flow until it reaches the consumer. The wood that is certified is coming from those sources and not from others, so that the consumer knows that this wood or bamboo or rubber is not contributed to deforestation or forest degradation. We are not entering in the quality of the paper, for example, or if this building would be done out of wood, that the beams have the right size. This is not our task. Our task is ensuring that these forest products come from sustainable sources wherever. They can be here in Korea, coming from Germany or from Chile, from countries that have a PEFC system. As the norm, despite they are adjusted to the countries, have been defined globally. And they are always consistent with national legislation, but also to agreed criteria indicators at the regional level. Well, first, it's obvious and fortunately increasingly recognized. It was not so when Kyoto was agreed 25 years ago, that forest is the single carbon sink, and CO2 is 3/4 of the greenhouse gases that we can manage. Forests contribute by expanding forests, as you have done in the past in Korea in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. It can happen as well once the forests are re-established, when the forests grow, what is happening now in your forest. It is also happening when you build with wood, because you sequester wood over centuries in buildings. And finally, if you substitute, if you have an aluminum window or plastic window and you put a wooden one, this requires much less embedded energy, as the processes for wood or for bamboo is basically the photosynthesis, and there is no energy. Whereas if you need a metal, you need to heat it very hard. Even in the recycling, you have to heat it again, and this consumes a lot of energy. And as this energy is still today to a high degree from fossil sources, you have an embedded emission that is not counted there. It is counted in the electricity or in the oil or gas that you're using, but at the end is happening. So by using forest products, you reduce enormously this carbon footprint. And that is basically the contribution of forests. And the more you have planted everything, what you have done in Korea, it's difficult to plant more trees, more area in Korea, and you have capitalized your forest, the most important is the substitution role. Not having the forest just standing, but manage. And of course, what is the role certification? As when you fell a tree, especially if society is not used, society becomes urban, it has been easy to create in your country a collective endeavor, the previous generation, to replant the country. But when you have been in this mood, as far as you plant, but you have no place to plant, this creates a big enthusiasm. But when people see a tree felling, if in the past the forests were gone, this generates tension and difficulties. So what forest certification does is to ensure that this axe or this chainsaw is sustainable. As we are dealing about dynamic carbon, only dynamic carbon, so felling trees, regenerating, and so on, creates a resilient forest that is more stable to fires, to insects, to wind or snow, whatever, but also is providing us the substitution effect of the products. And many think, no, better not do anything because it could be harming. No, I mean, I put always the example, a knife can injure a person, but if you have a surgery, you need the knife to enter and to solve any issue you have. So it is not the knife, it is the use of it that may be harming or not. And as it is the same instrument, it looks the same, it is through a professional forest management plus certification that you are able to prove that there is no risk of harm. On the contrary, this is going to leave the forest in a much more resilient situation. And that's for certification is one of the key elements to provide the sureness to the market, because you may have, as you had, a very good management on the side of the Korean Forest Service or smallholders and so on, but you have also to certify it with modern techniques. That is what certification provides, this third party on an agreed norm. Well, it's the same, it's a member. So the Korean Forest Certification System and all its structure behind has been set up following the PEFC norm. It is not a system that existed before, as we have 4 or 5 and that have incorporated later to PEFC and have adapted. It has been created from the scratch, from the zero, following the PEFC norms and integrating, of course, the Korean legislation and the stakeholders. And in that sense, is totally consistent with this approach. Of course, each country has different situations. From what we learned in Korea, the key issue is recovering forest management, as you practically had no forest in the early 50s after the war. And the key issue was planting. But now the issue is to manage this forest. And this is the same case here. And of course, we will support and discuss and share experience with I think PEFC family has also this advantage that there are many countries in different stages, they have passed different experiences, and you can always learn from the good and from the not so good experience of other countries, and then start this. And I think the moment is good in this moment, unfortunately due to the Ukraine war, but this is showing us, also COVID, that we need to ensure sufficient self-supply in the countries, and very especially Korea has a special security situation historically, that you have to ensure that you have sufficient food, energy supplies, and also biomaterial, so that you can be in a worst scenario self-sufficient. I think this is important for everybody. 5 years ago, everybody said we can buy food cheap, we can buy wood cheap, we can buy energy now. Everybody is conscious about these issues. And if you have a strong supply, you are even more independent of market fluctuations or any threat that may come. And I think this is a big opportunity saying, well, this is also our contribution to climate change. If we have forests, we have to manage them. This will offset a lot of emissions by avoiding the imports and the consumption by transport or the consumption of non-renewable materials. No, this is important, first because, Korea is a full developed country and their consumers should be critical and aware that through the consumer choices, they at the end affect the market even globally. This is more difficult to us, to countries that are in a very low development stadium. Also, they are very weak consumers. Your consumers are potent consumers. So in that sense, when they consume forest products, it's important that they try to ensure that these products are sustainable. They could come from non-sustainable sources. In that sense, this is important, be the wood from Korea or be the wood from any other country imported. And of course, if it is coming from Korea, there is no risk of unsustainable sources in Korea. But on the contrary, it's an opportunity to link it to this restoration history and the strong collective endeavor that it was behind in previous generation. Because at the end, these forests grow and have a product, and it is very positive in any terms, in socioeconomic, in environmental terms, to ensure that these forests are well managed, you have the knowledge, and these products are consumed and avoid CO2 emissions and avoid imports from other places. That you are having this linkage that was lost in your country, that has been not lost in other countries, like for example Japan, because they never lost their forest. I learned yesterday that the eastern part of the country is having depopulation issues. So this will also provide opportunities for this rural community, instead of moving to the big cities, that they can have their own economy, they can heat, again, instead of gas or petrol or electricity with the firewood that will come in the first standings, and later on can use the wood for better uses. And you know that this furniture has been done with Korean wood, and so this linkage is a very important one. As well, the same as you would most likely like the mushrooms that you eat or whatever that are from near sources, the same kilometer zero logic should be with forest products as far as possible, and you have resources for it. Yes, we were discussing yesterday in a joint session led by the Korean Forest Certification Council, the ESG question. It's true that the two systems, forest certification and ESG, have a lot of overlap, so much information can be drained out of the forest certification process, but both systems have tailored different approaches. And I would say that there are two situations. One thing is the case of forest industries that may like to apply it, ESG, and they have to know the origin of the sources and so on. In the origin of the resources, it is totally aligned. And as I comment, forest certification provides a lot of information, and most likely in the future we will need to align our certification stronger to ESG, so that especially in the chain of custody and value chain, for the industry, so that they can drain directly all the information they need from there. It is important that all products, and for sure those who we use more daily, is paper. No one buys furniture every day, but you can read a newspaper or a journal or a book every day, every week, so on a daily basis. Or you can pack some present or whatever, so it's important that this kind of day-to-day uses, and especially everything that is related to paper, be printed or for hygienic uses, is something that we use daily, and we buy every week, frequent, in difference to the furniture, the house that we may build or buy. And in that sense, despite, of course, especially in the building, there is an enormous amount of wood compared to paper, but this decision we may do once or twice in life. In that sense, it's very important that in this daily consumption exercise, we try to identify and to demand that these products are certified. Otherwise, most of the paper of the world are using the residues of the wood processes. So if you have a wooden structure, there's a part of the wood that cannot be used because the wood is round and you need it squared, so there is always a loss, or the sun dust that comes out of it. All this is used for paper. It's a super, and paper is also the most recycled commodity. It's also important to say, no, in this category, we ensure you that we are recycling to a degree of 7, 8, 10 times the paper, so the consumer says, no, there is all the effort to reduce our environmental footprint. Well, the first I think is in our house for weekends and in the summer, we heat with pellets and firewood. The firewood out of the trees in the garden, but the main heating out of pellets, and the pellets is certified. I know, I buy it in Leroy Merlin, and I know the company that is providing in Spain these pellets, which is in a very forest area that has hardly any other economic sector. And I know the leader of the company that is a woman, and that is really doing a lot of efforts to improve the company, so it's nice to buy their pellets. Well, PEFC is an organization, and we need to have a long-term approach. Forestry is a long-term business. This is very important, and this was set up from the very beginning when PEFC was established in 1999. We are trying to move PEFC forward in this moment, understanding that the organization has grown a lot, and it most likely is in these typical phases of the insects where they have to change their skin, the metamorphosis. The old clothes were too restricted to the no challenges. We've expanded a lot, so one of the priorities will be regionalization, to have structures in the different regions, for surely starting from Asia, where we are much more mature. You are much more mature in this region. We have to tackle the areas where we still are weak, Central America, Africa mainly, also the drylands, North Africa, Middle East, Central Asia is also depending. We have to be more present in big events like this one. We have to communicate much more. We have to create a more cohesion between the members, that they understand that it is a global endeavor, that we understand the different situation of the different members to cross-stitch. And we want also to taking advantage of this demand to know how much CO2 a forest is sequestering, especially new planting. We want to not overburden our certification standards, but to establish addendas that may allow to accommodate new demands that might not be needed by a very smallholder, and we don't want to burden the smallholder. This was our starting story. But if required, that we may activate additional certification, thematic certifications like agroforestry, like trees outside forest, like offset afforestations, like many specific cases that would burden our standard minimum level, but they may be required. This is basically the priorities in this stage. We want to have also a more, we are still very Eurocentric due to the start, and we want to, despite I'm also European, but I think it's very important that we ensure that our staff is more international, and that we are having this broad perspective, trying to find the value of combining the different strengths in the different countries. This is important. I think that Korea is an inspiring example. Of course, there have been other countries that have restored the forest, but no country has turned the tide so extraordinarily intensively and fast like Korea did. So this is really an important national achievement in very difficult conditions. But it's important also to know when the time has come to change the perspective. You cannot plant the trees on the roofs. You have done your work. Now the issue is to manage these forests. These forests are not static issues. You see the pictures of 30 years, 50 years ago is different of today. So there is a risk as forests grow very slow to think that they are static. No, this is not minerals. They are living, and it is important now to enter in this forest management part and to guide this forest to reduce competition. Most likely also to enter it in the school programs, that not only the achievement of the past generation, but in this generation, the issue to avoid fires, to avoid insect outbreaks, to avoid wind throw and snow damages and pest and diseases is that you reactivate forest management. And the beginning would be basically firewood for the winter to heat in the more rural areas. But in 20, 30 years, we will start to get wood for construction, for furniture, for other uses, and this will create another diversified sector, especially for rural communities. I think this is the basic. It's important that society doesn't get stuck. There was a planting time, yes, but once planting time, the management time is now the tending time is, and this gives many opportunities to have also much more diversified forest than just the first growth that is a very dense forest, and it's not the same as a more mature forest.